All right, I have a wonderful show for you today where we're going to be going over some of the biggest stories in the news. To help me do that, I have with me Dr. Michael Savage. Dr. Savage, thank you so much for joining me. This is your third time on the show. I appreciate you coming on. I know that you are very busy running your own show, your own media company, which is just thriving and doing so well. The first thing I wanted to jump in with you on is President Donald Trump has been convicted of 34 bogus felonies. Keep in mind, they were originally one misdemeanor, elevated to a felony, and changed from a state issue to a federal election issue in order to get Donald Trump. But now Democrats and rhinos can call Trump a felon between now and whenever he wins his appeal. However, within just days of that, he raises $200 million and rises in the poll. What do you make of this?
Well, what we all make of it is we know it was a sham show trial out of the Soviet Union. We watched the lowest form of political humanity prosecute him. We saw that the judge, Juan Merchan, was originally not born in this country. And that's an important point, which I want to reiterate here. I researched him because something didn't, it stank to high heaven on every level. We know that Alvin Bragg, is about the, I hate to use vulgar terms, but that type ran bordellos in Harlem when I was a youth. And they picked him off the street. They made him into a lawyer. Then they made him a DA with George Soros's dirty, filthy money. And the city is in disrepair. They're prosecuting civilians for defending themselves, like that wonderful Marine on the subway car who had been attacked by a maniac, protected the whole car. Bragg is choosing to prosecute the white Marine. He's a racist guy, this Bragg. Trump is the biggest racist trophy he can put on the wall. But the judge may be worse because he comes from Columbia, and not Columbia University, the nation of Columbia, which, as we know, has a little history of a certain white product that took the world by storm. I'm not implying he has anything to do with that, but still in all, bells go off. He comes from Columbia. He goes to a fourth-rate law school, Hofstra, which is rated 160 out of 199 law schools that are rated. From that obscure law school, he becomes a family court judge. They handpick him to prosecute Trump. Handpick him. They're supposed to be a random selection. Oddly enough, he's been involved in 3 of the Trump cases, including Alan Weisselberg and one other. So this is a setup from the get-go, but there were so many flaws in the trial, Stephen, pointed out by better legal experts than myself. And of course he can appeal it. And of course he's liable to win on appeal. But the question is what happens between now and then. He's going to be sentenced by this questionable judge 3 days before the Republican convention. People say, oh, he'll never put him in jail. I say not so sure. I said, remember, they jailed Martha Stewart on an obscure charge of lying to the FBI. They put Martha Stewart in jail. That never should have happened. It was a travesty at the time. Somebody was out to get her. New York is so corrupt that if they want to indict a ham sandwich, they will indict a ham sandwich. In this case, they're indicting a former president of the United States. Then I watched that terrible human being, Raskin. Here is a man who, during the hearings on Fauci just the other day or yesterday, the whole world's in up in arms over the COVID vaccine, the side effects, the enhancement of the COVID virus with money from Fauci's NIH. And Raskin gets up and says, but Donald Trump was president while you were the head of the NIH, right? Dr. Fauci. And it was Donald Trump who was trying to make Donald Trump the problem. Now, here's the thing. When you have a Democrat like Raskin, who just survived cancer, whose own son committed suicide, a terrible tragedy for anyone in any family, a grown son, Harvard Law, fights depression his whole life, very common in America. It's a terrible thing to witness. And the son commits suicide. Now, what does that have to do with him? You would think that a man would get a speck of humility, a speck of retrospective humility and introspection and say, geez, maybe I'm just doing something wrong in life, that these terrible things are happening to me. Maybe, just maybe, the effects are boomeranging onto myself, my own health, and my family. But no, he becomes even crazier. And he attacks Trump while talking to Fauci about the Wuhan virus. So I'm not so sure, Stephen, that Trump will not be jailed by this corrupt, evil Soviet Democrat system. But I did an analysis about a year ago with Joel Pollack of Breitbart, great guy. I'm sure you know Joel.
Yes.
Joel's a graduate of Harvard Law and as good as they come. And he said that Trump could actually run from prison and win. Now, that sounds good on paper, but just think of the ramifications of that. We have a president in prison, and it'll be quite a long time that he'd be in prison. I don't know what they could do. Put him in jail. They give him a 2-year sentence just till after the election, a year or two. Or so he's going to run from prison. And he then has to pardon himself. So the smart Alex on the internet immediately said, oh, you're wrong, Savage. He can't pardon himself. It's a state crime. And they figured that out in advance, even if he becomes president. I said, you're wrong, because I did some research. And I found that he could possibly pardon himself, Stephen, if he's found guilty and put in prison. The case I found is a U.S. Supreme Court which affirmed the presidential power to pardon in a case called Ex parte Garland. Believe it or not, an 1866 case involving a former Confederate senator who had been pardoned by President Andrew Johnson. And here's the punchline. It's important I read it. It's one paragraph. In that case, the Supreme Court made clear that the pardon power, and this is critical to your audience, quote, extends to every offense known to the law and may be exercised at any time after its commission, either before legal proceedings are taken or during their pendency or after conviction and judgment, end quote. Okay, so people will still say, but it's still not sure that he can pardon himself because it's a state felony. It's not a federal crime. So I went on to the left-wing American Bar Association website. I did another piece of research. The ABA itself says, listen to this, Stephen, there is a general consensus that a presidential pardon power only applies to federal cases. Consensus means it's not 100% sure. Yeah. So if I were Trump's attorney, I would run a railroad car through that one. And I would make sure that that issue became a big issue and he could pardon himself. So it's a long, convoluted legal process, should he be jailed. First of all, we're assuming he's going to win the election. I'm not so sure of that either. For a couple of reasons. One, because of the spurious nature of the last election, the way votes are counted in this country. The mail-in ballots are rife with potential for fraud, if not outright fraud. How long it takes to determine the outcome of an election in this country when we have computerized systems that can see a pack of cigarettes from space. We can't count an election within 6 hours. For God's sakes, third world countries do it faster than we do. So it's a very fuzzy issue. So all the money in the world that he raised, it sounds great on paper. But, you know, Stephen, that unto itself bothers me a little. Let me tell you why. Now we're evaluating a presidential candidate by how much money they can raise. Think about it. Oh, he raised $200 million. Great. I'm glad to hear it. And Biden only raised $110 million. Oh, wow. So now we're judging people on how much money they can raise, not what they stand for or what they're going to do for the country. That's what's starting to bother me, is that the narrative suddenly switched to how much money the candidates are raising. Okay. It's pretty sad, Stephen.
Yeah.
That's about all I have to say on the Trump situation. I mean, you know, the same day that Juan Merchan, the judge from Colombia, ruled through the jury that he rigged up, that Trump was guilty, the very same day Biden secretly authorized the use of American weapons against Russia on Russian territory, which was a red line for Vladimir Putin. But Biden did that in the middle of the trial, right at while everyone was looking here, he did that there. So these psychopaths who are running this country, and there's no other word for them, they're sociopaths, they're psychopaths, and they're downright evil, now want to start World War III. What did they think excuse me, Putin's going to do. What would we do if Mexico started firing missiles made in China into New Mexico, Arizona to kill Border Patrol agents? I'm just coming up with a scenario. You think we'd sit here and take it?
No.
No. Okay, so this is crazy. They want a war, by the way. They want the Cold War they started getting even hotter than it is and turned into not just a hot war, but a red hot war just before the election, hoping that in their twisted little pea brains that the nation would rally behind the president in a time of war. I'm telling you, I think that they're going to start a bigger conflagration with Russia on purpose and drag NATO in and drag NATO troops in, which will be a real joke. You've got hardened Russian troops now, have been fighting for 2 years. They're going to face off against disco goers on ecstasy from Belgium.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is, it started off as we're not even going to send long-range missiles because it could escalate the war. Then about a year in, he's like, okay, we're going to send them, but don't use them. Don't use them, right? We just want them there.
Yeah.
And then now, like you say, while everyone's distracted, worrying about Trump, he gives permission. And this coming up on the 80th anniversary of storming the beaches of Normandy, D-Day, where, they have memorials about Russia and Europe working together to kill Adolf Hitler. And now they're saying, we're going to send in people from England. We're going to send in troops from France. We're going to send in troops from the United States. It's going to start off with, we're just there to train them. No fighting. And then within a year, they're going to be fighting.
Well, look, we both know special forces have been on the ground in Ukraine for a long time now. Everybody can figure that out. This is a repeat of Vietnam all over again. Advisors. They're showing them how to use the equipment. They're advising them how to marshal troops in the field. They're advising them how to attack the enemy. Come on. We've been involved in this war for a very long time. Having said that, Ukraine has suffered terribly. We have to make that point. Whole cities have been devastated. Yes, so we have bigger issues than domestic issues. We have an international issue that is spiraling to a world war. And we have Israel, Hamas, which is getting worse. Northern Israel is now burning because Hezbollah is firing rockets into the northern Israeli forests. So, I'm sorry, Israel's on fire in the north, fighting with Egypt now. This looks like it could turn into another Middle East war that could drag us into that one next, all under Biden's crazy people. Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State, goes to Kiev 2 weeks ago and goes to a discotheque with a guitar. That's his idea of diplomacy in the middle of men dying by the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, it makes no sense to me other than they want these wars. Biden is struggling in the polls. He gets to look like a great general, a great wartime president, but he doesn't have to lose any American soldiers. No boots on the ground that are being killed, and nothing's in the newspapers. He just gets to look like this hero. And now he's battling between, do I want to look good to the Muslims in Michigan, or do I want to continue to get money from Jewish donors here in America? I mean, he's really put himself in a pickle.
He'll get both. He'll get the Muslim voters and the Jewish billionaires anyway. That's what's going to happen. They're never leaving the Democrat Party. They're never voting for Trump or Republican. They'd rather die. And, going back to Trump again, I don't want to get hung up only on Trump, but I compared in my latest podcast what they're doing to Trump to death by 1,000 cuts, an ancient form of Chinese torture where it's called slow slicing. It's a horrible thing where they would take a victim, tie him to a pole, and very publicly make crowds watch this enemy of the state in China. Sorry. They'd start slashing him in areas of his body that were not lethal cuts, likely not to bleed very much, but hurt like hell. And they do 1,000 such cuts till the person bled to death. That's what they're doing to Trump. Death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jesus.
It's awful what they're doing to him. By the way, you probably saw this also just this week. Within the last 48 hours, Biden suddenly says, "I can't wait for Republicans to give me authority. We have to shut down the border. I'll be using executive order to close the border." Is this not just trying to trick us right before an election? He doesn't care about the border.
Now he's going to do after it's like shutting the gates after the foxes in the hen house. I mean, we have 12 million of them already come in. Now he's going to close the gates.
The border situation we've got. I mean, they already believe there were about 20 million illegals in the country. Now, we've got anywhere from 10 to 12 million that have come in just in the last 3 years. You've got people saying, "Oh, these Republicans, they keep saying that we're just letting them in so that they will vote Democrat." But then you have someone like Chuck Schumer that's like, "Hey, if you want the American dream to keep going, we've got to keep letting illegals in the country. It's the only way to have a good life."
Where are they working, Stephen? I don't know if they're working. I don't know if they're working. They're all living on the dole one way or the other, whether it's Catholic Charities, Protestant Family Services, Hebrew Aid Society, all the religious front groups are making billions of dollars on this through federal grants. I don't know that they're working. And by the way, the reason Hispanics are moving to Trump, Hispanics who live here, is because they're threatened by this wave of lower wage individuals, crime-ridden, disease-ridden individuals who are now making the indigenous population of previous waves of Hispanic immigrants very nervous because they're cutting their wages down, by the way, if they take a job at all. I hear it from Hispanic workers. I talk to them. I live in California. I mean, if anyone knows about it, I do. They don't like this policy, and they don't like this wave coming in from Venezuela.
Well, yeah, they're emptying their prisons. I've read the articles. I've seen it with my own eyes. They're trying to flood the United States, not with the best. Although, Eric Adams says, "Why aren't we putting these immigrants to work? We know they're good swimmers. They made it across the border." Like, really? Did you just say that in a press conference?
What a racist thing to say. They're good swimmers because they swam across the Rio Grande. Oh my God. That would be like saying, bring in the Israelis because they make good knishes, or I don't know. Wait, let's get more Polish refugees because they make good dumplings. This is crazy. You talk about stereotypes. Let's have more Irish because they like beer.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
These people are blind. These Democrat functionaries are, they're actually not that smart. Clever, yes. Manipulative, yes. They're not that smart, Stephen.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good observation. Here's something that I observed. Again, I don't want this whole thing to be about Trump, but while in office, President Bill Clinton had many sexual escapades, including the most famous one with his intern in the Oval Office. He then lied to the American people on TV. Later, he couldn't hide his lies anymore. He came forward. While president, he settles a $850,000 sexual harassment claim with Paula Jones that left the Clintons so broke, Hillary actually stole furniture from the White House. Bill stole top secret classified documents to stick in his sock drawer. We have this kind of stuff in the past with other presidents. Why is Donald Trump, with much, much smaller accusations, held to such a bigger standard with the media and with Washington, D.C.?
Well, I mean, the main thing is he's an outsider. Again, not to extol his virtues and make him a saint. He is a bellicose man who's antagonized a lot of people before he came to Washington. Then once he got to Washington, he basically dared the establishment to take him on. He said, "Screw you, I can handle it." He did. I'll never forget what Chuck Schumer said after he won. He said, if you take on the intelligence establishment, they got 6 ways to Sunday to get back at you. That was Schumer. That was old Schumer from Brooklyn. Big Shoe Schumer. So the intelligence services are getting back at him. He basically challenged the establishment, of which he is not a part. When I say the establishment, meaning established political parties, he's not in that structure. The RNC never liked him. The rhinos certainly don't like Trump. And they've said to him, we'll show you who the boss is. Now, remember, when he ran in 15, 16, remember what he did to a fellow named Jeb Bush, who has since been forgotten. Bush was the heir apparent to the Bush dynasty. The father and the grandfather were presidents. The grandfather was the head of the CIA. And I'll never forget what Barbara Bush said when Trump ran. She was infuriated. She said things that were very threatening. Never forget, the Bush family hates him more than anyone on this planet for having stolen the presidency from their son, Jeb Bush. Everyone's forgotten that little fact, Stephen. So you say, well, what am I getting at? I'm getting at the establishment. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle they're on. They're all the same. At the end of the day, it's like, a house of cards or a shell game. You pick this shell up, that shell is no bean underneath either of them. Okay, we'll run now, then you'll run the next 4 years, but we'll all do what we all want to do anyway. Wars, whatever. So he challenged the establishment, and they're saying to him, we'll show you who has the power. It's not you. You may be a big mouth rich man from New York who thinks you can bamboozle, 80 million people, but you can't fool us, and we own the country. It's our country, not yours. It's the old guard that's doing this to this upstart called Donald Trump. I think that's why this is happening. And you say, well, why not Clinton? Because he was in the party system. Clinton was a member in good standing. Him and Hillary became the Democrat Party, after all. They ran it.
Yeah.
Right. They ran the DNC. So they played the party system the way the Communist Party system is run in China, or the way the old Soviet system was run. If you're in the party, you play the game the party wants to be played. You don't play it the way you want to play it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I had not considered the angle of the Bush family and their ties to the CIA. That is I'm going to have to research and think about that. I will say this. I know you'll remember this, is Jeb Bush's website running for president. The URL, the domain expires, and Trump buys it and then publicly announces, this guy couldn't even keep his own website domain. I bought it and took over. How's he going to be president of the United States? And after that, Jeb Bush never recovered. Everybody was like, oh, yeah, Gal, that's a good point. The guy can't even keep a website safe.
Stephen, here's the problem. I support Donald Trump. I saw him a few weeks ago at Mar-a-Lago. I will vote for Donald Trump. I'll do everything I can for him. But the truth is, there's a scorched earth mentality that Donald Trump has that alienates as many people as it attracts. The scorched earth mentality. You watch fights like in a ring, a martial art, whatever it may be, whatever they call UFC type of thing. They don't kill the enemy. They defeat the enemy. And when the enemy's down and pounding, they let him off the mat. Trump doesn't let them off the mat. He kills them till they're dead. He destroyed Jeb Bush. He made mush out of him. He crushed him into liquid. He just did the same thing to a wonderful man named the governor of Florida, named DeSantis. I'm sorry, I liked DeSantis. And between you and I, if Trump had not run again and DeSantis was the front runner, he'd be ahead of Biden in the polls by 10 points right now and would have stayed there probably even beyond that because he's unassailable. But I know people now don't want to hear this, Stephen. It sounds like blasphemy, but I'm not in a party. I'm an outside independent observer. They destroyed DeSantis and killed DeSantis. They didn't just beat him. They could have beaten him and kept him as a viable Republican candidate for the sake of the nation in the future. He's a younger man. He has a wonderful history in the military. I know he was a JAG. I know that. But the pictures of him in those whites, those Navy whites, when he was a Navy SEAL attorney, those are golden for running for office. Beautiful wife with a great story, a double mastectomy, a wonderful wife, great family, great governor. He was the future of the Republican Party. But now they've turned him into a laughing stock. They didn't just beat Jeb Bush in the primaries. They killed him. Short, he wears the high heels, he's this. They made names up, these sanctimonious things that children would do. Malicious children, Stephen. So what I'm saying is that this almost malicious behavior of the team for Trump, I'm not making any friends now, I understand that, is now coming back to haunt them. Because people don't like bullies. And sometimes Trump comes across as a bully. Now you say, well, you need to be a bully to get ahead in this world. You do, but there's a way to do it too. There's a way to be a bully and not show the bullying. I mean, the man who runs China is obviously a murderer and a bully. Does he go out there and show you him bullying people? Have we ever seen any images of Xi doing this to anyone? Well, it's a controlled environment. Or Putin. We know Putin's what he is, but you don't see pictures of him destroying his political opponents. They don't want to be seen that way. Trump, on the other hand, savors the idea of being seen as this guy who can crush anybody. And the world doesn't like that type of personality, Stephen. So I'm trying to see it from the advantage of the whole world. Of you asked, why is he being attacked when Clinton wasn't for far worse acts? The answer is because he took on the establishment and they're more powerful than any one man.
Yeah. Couldn't Trump change his address back to his New Jersey golf course and ask Ron DeSantis to be his vice president?
Sure, he could. We've seen rumors of such after calling him every name under the sun. Does DeSantis want to be attached to him right now when he may have a future in the Republican Party without him? I thought I interviewed Tulsi Gabbard a few weeks ago. I loved her. I thought she was great. She left the Democrat Party because they became too extreme. I thought she would make a fabulous vice presidential candidate to be with Trump. She has so many things going for her. She's straightforward. She's honest, good looking, military background, fought in Iraq, for God's sakes, indigenous, born in Samoa, Hindu father. I mean, she's an amazing woman, aside from all of the characteristics. And I actually, while interviewing her, thought she could save America. I saw some of a Jeanne d'Arc in her, Jeanne d'Arc. I thought this woman had the capacity to actually lead the country and save it. I thought she would have been a great candidate as a VP. I still do.
Yeah.
Almost better than DeSantis, because then I'm nothing against white males. I'm of European heritage myself. But I mean, let's say Trump plus a woman like her certainly broadens the coalition of demographics.
Well, I think it also gets people that are on the fence to go, okay, well, maybe we could deal with Trump, the things we don't like about Trump, for a few years, but then we have possibly 8 more years with this other person.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
I think she's the better choice than DeSantis because of the way the country is tilted. I mean, she's, as I say, the father named her Tulsi, which is a Hindu word for, I forget what it was, but okay, so she's ethnicity. Her ethnicity is that of a European and a Hindu. Her father was Hindu, I think, and her mother was Anglo or European. It's irrelevant, but they ran a health food store when she was a girl, which is interesting. I mean, they're like old hippies in a way, which is a big selling point. They ran a health food store. She worked in the luncheonette in the health food store. She comes from working class family. She's not a wealthy woman. She told me on my podcast she can't even afford to buy a house in Hawaii, and she was born there. That's pooling all the money from her whole family. She said we couldn't make the down payment for a starter house in Hawaii. I said, that's terrible, Tulsi, awful. But she's an honest woman. I can guarantee you that many, many politicians could get more than one down payment for a house.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I had her on my show. And I thought the same thing.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Wonderful, brave, courageous, incredible background. We'll see who Trump, maybe right around the time of his conviction, he'll use that as a way to soften the blow or something like that. Michael, I want to hear about your book, and I want people to know about it. Tell me about A Savage Republic: Inside the Plot to Destroy America, because you've been spot on with so many things. Tell us about it.
It was written for this election. I write ahead, not behind. And many of the items in the book are so appropriate, unfortunately, right now. All I've got to do is read the back jacket copy for everyone to hear. And the point is this, a book can be more than a book. A book can be a billboard on your coffee table. So let's say you have someone in your family who's a Democrat, those of you listening to Stephen, or a daughter who just came back from college and she's totally brainwashed. Ask her if she'd be willing to at least discuss some ideas with you. She's not going to change her mind, but would she at least be open-minded enough to discuss the issues? Well, what are the issues, Dad? Well, I don't know. This guy's savage. He's not stupid. He has a doctorate from UC Berkeley. He's a botanist, a plant collector. I mean, he's a former nutrition writer. Maybe you'll like what he has to say. He said, a warning to all freedom-loving Americans. Your rights are under attack from the Biden administration and the radical left-wing socialists. Dad, I don't want to hear anymore. But honey, listen, just these bullet points, dear. Tell me if this is not what's going on in America right now. Death of free speech. Look what's going on in the colleges. They shut you down if you disagree with them. Destroyed our borders. Every nation, honey, is defined by its borders. No nation on earth has ever not been defined by its borders. Minority crime wave. You can't go into New York without fear of being pushed in front of a subway car or molested in the streets. The perverse attacks on our school children. We have nothing against trans people, dear, but we don't want them teaching our little babies. That's what we say by the perverse attacks on our school children. The raging foreign wars, dear. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and Russians have been killed by this proxy war. Surely, as a nice progressive daughter of mine, you understand that we need to be against war because peace is patriotic, right, dear? Those are some of the topics that are in this book, and I think that that's a good way of trying to reach one voter in your family.
Yeah, it's a great book. You go through in detail so many things that we're living through right now. Let me go over this last topic, and then I'll get you out because I know you're busy. I read a lot of international news. I see France, England, Ireland, Belgium, Holland, Brussels. They are all dealing with migrant crime, illegal migrants attacking the police, attacking children, attacking women for what they're wearing, where they're going, telling you how to raise your family. It's now starting to pop up in the United States of America. It has me worried. What are your thoughts?
Well, I wrote about it 25 years ago when I said ultra tolerance is killing us. That's number one. I mean, if you invite people in from a 15th century with a 15th century mentality, as many of these Islamists have, they're living in the 1500s, not the year 2024. They put their women in tents called burqas, which, by the way, is not even in the Quran. That's an adaptation of fanatics within Islam. They put their women in tents. They perform mutilation of their daughters so the daughters cannot have sexual pleasure. It's a fact. They preach to convert or kill the infidel in their mosques, by and large. And they will not stop until the country is under Sharia law and we are knuckled under to them. So you wonder why you invite them into France, an open country, liberté, égalité, fraternité. They think that will apply to people who come from the 15th century. No, the 15th century barbarians say, no, you're going to be like us. We're not going to be like you. And you're paying for it, by the way. You're giving us money. You're giving us apartments. You don't arrest us when we attack police. So go to hell. You're weak. You're garbage because we only understand strength. And you're weaklings. You let your own daughters be raped. You let your own daughters be molested by us, and then you put us in jail for 3 minutes. So what would a person from the 15th century think of a nation that is so Weak, Stephen. Again, it's a perspective that may not be popular with people, or they may get offended, but that's how the barbarians think. They only understand power and force.
Yeah, there was a girl. She had a video go viral. I think she was from Sweden, where she said, "In the coming years, it will be written that this was the generation that allowed themselves to be taken over by an outside enemy while they paid for it." And like, I'm looking at, like you said earlier, are these illegal immigrants in America working? No, they are on the dole. They're on our welfare system. Meanwhile, our seniors, our veterans are going without, and these people are being put up in $700 a night hotels. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and where's the money going? You see, people don't realize that we say $500-700 a night for these illegal aliens, which is an outrage. But we forget that someone owns those hotels. Someone is a Democrat donor who gets the contract to put them up in these hotels and treat them like a five-star guest. So the money that's flowing out of our pockets, the taxpayer, goes into the hands of Democrat, probably Republican donors as well, who own hotels. So the political system is totally corrupted, and we've heard this before. And just saying it doesn't change a damn thing, but I guess not saying it is even worse.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, this has been a great show. I wish we could go on and on. I'm going to put a link to your book down below. Also, can I point people towards michaelsavage.com? Is that a good website?
Yeah,
for
that's
them
where all my podcasts are. But I have a bigger thing to tell your audience. Notice I had a mild anaphylactic reaction to nuts when I began, and I was coughing like crazy. And I went and got not an aspirin, but ascorbic acid powder, vitamin C powder, which I take. And within 10 minutes, it stopped the anaphylaxis.
Oh, wow.
My face had turned red. I was coughing. There were probably some nuts I was allergic to, and I never had a nut allergy, but I'm suffering severe allergies right now. You know, I'm a health food writer originally. My doctorate's in nutrition and epidemiology from the University of California at Berkeley. And in the 70s, I wrote health books, herbal books, nutrition books, books on homeopathy. So I practice what I preach, not to 100%. I'm not a fanaticist. I'm not an absolutist, but it worked. Let's hear it for vitamin C powder.
Yes. Yeah. No, I did notice that. I did notice that. And I'm glad that you're feeling better. Michael, thank you so much for coming on. This is Dr. Michael Savage. I'll leave that book, down below. I appreciate you coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Always a great honor to be with you, Stephen Gardner. Thank you again.